"You should be grateful we even let you live here," my daughter Brianna said to me in my own kitchen, pointing her finger at me like I was some kind of charity case who'd forgotten his place. I stood there, holding the coffee mug I'd made in my workshop 40 years ago, staring at the woman I'd raised and sacrificed for, wondering when she'd started thinking of my house as hers and me as the guest who'd overstayed his welcome. 3 weeks later, while she and her husband were sipping cocktails in Cancun, I signed the papers that sold the house right out from under them and left them a note explaining that gratitude works both ways. If you've ever been treated like a burden in the place you built with your own hands, if you've ever had someone take your kindness for weakness and your generosity for stupidity, then settle in, friend. Because this is the story of how a 69-year-old carpenter showed his ungrateful family that the foundation they'd been standing on wasn't as solid as they thought. I'm Larry, and what happened next proved that sometimes the best way to teach people about gratitude is to give them something to actually be grateful for. That house on Maple Street wasn't just where I lived. It was where I'd poured 45 years of blood, sweat, and craftsmanship into every board, every joint, every hand-carved detail that made it more than just a building. I'd built it with my own hands for Margaret and me, back when we were newlyweds, with more dreams than dollars, adding rooms as our family grew, upgrading systems as I learned new skills, creating a home that told the story of our life together in every corner and doorway. After Margaret passed 3 years ago, that house felt too big and too quiet, but it was still mine, still filled with memories of Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings and all the ordinary moments that make a house into a home. When Brianna called crying about losing their apartment and needing a place to stay just for a few months while they got back on their feet, I opened my door without hesitation. Family helps family. That's what Margaret had always taught me, and that's what I believed. But here's the thing about letting people move into your space temporarily. Some folks start thinking temporary is permanent, and some people mistake your kindness for an invitation to take over your entire life. What started as a father helping his daughter in crisis slowly became a daughter treating her father like a tenant who couldn't afford the rent, and I was too shocked by the transformation to see it happening until it was almost too late. The morning Brianna told me I should be grateful to live in my own house was the morning I realized that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all, it's enabling. And sometimes, the only way to restore respect is to remind people exactly what they stand to lose when they take your generosity for granted. If you're someone who believes that respect should flow both ways, even between parents and children, if you think that people who mistake your kindness for weakness deserve to learn some hard lessons about consequences, then stick around. Because what I did next taught my family that the man who built the house was perfectly capable of deciding who got to live in it. If you're enjoying this story about standing up for yourself when your own family tries to walk all over you, go ahead and subscribe to Grandpa's Diaries. I've got plenty more tales about the difference between helping people and enabling them. And trust me, the lesson I taught them is one they'll never forget. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in March, with Brianna's voice shaking in that way that reminded me of when she was 8 years old and had broken Margaret's favorite vase. "Dad," she said, trying to sound calm but failing completely, "Derek lost his consulting contract and we can't make rent this month. The landlord is starting eviction proceedings and we have nowhere to go with the kids." My heart broke for her and for my grandchildren, Emma and Ryan, who were too young to understand why their world was falling apart. Margaret had been gone for 6 months by then, and the silence in our big house felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest every evening. The thought of having family around again, of hearing children's laughter echo through rooms that had been too quiet for too long, seemed like it might be good for all of us. "Pack your things," I told Brianna without hesitation. "You know you always have a home here." They arrived the next weekend with a U-Haul truck and gratitude that seemed genuine enough to make me feel like I was doing the right thing. Brianna hugged me tight and promised it would just be for a few months, just until Derek found another contract and they could save up for a new apartment. Derek shook my hand and thanked me for stepping up when it really mattered, and the kids ran through the house with the excitement of children discovering new territory to explore. For the first few weeks, it felt like a blessing rather than a burden. Emma and Ryan brought life back into rooms that had been empty since Margaret died, and their energy reminded me of when Brianna was small, and this house was the center of a growing family's universe. I taught Emma how to use some of my simpler woodworking tools, showed Ryan the secret compartment I'd built into his mother's old bedroom, and felt useful again in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Brianna seemed genuinely appreciative those first months, helping with grocery shopping and cooking, organizing family movie nights where we'd all squeeze onto the couch together, and encouraging the kids to spend time with their grandfather learning skills that schools didn't teach anymore. Derek worked from my home office, setting up his computer equipment and taking video calls with clients, apparently making progress toward getting their finances back on track. I converted the guest bedroom into a proper space for the kids, building them custom bunk beds and toy storage that matched the craftsmanship of the rest of the house. Margaret would have loved seeing children in that room again, would have been proud of the way I welcomed our daughter's family during their time of need. I was happy to share my space, my skills, and my resources with people I loved, believing that this was what family meant, showing up for each other when times got tough. But somewhere around month 6, the dynamic started shifting in ways I didn't immediately recognize. The gratitude became less frequent, the temporary arrangement started feeling more permanent, and the house that had been mine for 45 years slowly started feeling like it belonged to someone else. What I thought was family helping family was gradually becoming family taking over family, and I was too generous in my spirit and too trusting in my nature to see the transformation happening right under my own roof. The first sign that something had changed came when Derek started rearranging the living room furniture without asking, moving pieces that Margaret and I had chosen together and replacing them with items from their old apartment that didn't match the character of my craftsman-style home. "We just need to make it more functional for the kids," he explained when I questioned the changes, speaking to me with the patronizing tone you'd use with someone who didn't understand modern family dynamics. Brianna began making rules about which areas of the house could be used when, explaining that the kids needed quiet time in the afternoon, so I couldn't use my workshop because the sound of my tools might disturb their naps. My workshop, the basement space where I'd created every piece of furniture in the house, where I'd taught myself carpentry skills that had supported my family for decades, suddenly became off-limits during family time that seemed to expand a little more each week. The kitchen, which had been Margaret's domain and then mine after she passed, gradually became Brianna's territory, with my cooking schedule adjusted around meal plans that accommodated Derek's dietary preferences and the kids' picky eating habits. The coffee maker I'd used for 20 years was replaced with an expensive espresso machine that Derek had ordered online, and my simple breakfast routine was complicated by discussions about optimizing counter space for their new appliances. Derek began making comments about the house's outdated features, suggesting that the hardwood floors I'd installed myself needed to be replaced with low-maintenance options, and that the kitchen cabinets I'd handcrafted from solid oak were too dark for modern tastes. He spoke about these changes as if they were inevitable improvements rather than personal preferences, as if my 45 years of careful craftsmanship were obstacles to overcome rather than achievements to appreciate. The most painful changes were the ones that erased Margaret's presence from the spaces we'd shared. The reading nook where she'd spent her evenings became Derek's home office extension, with his computer cables and business files replacing her bookshelf and comfortable chair. The garden, where she'd grown flowers, was converted into a play area for the kids, with her carefully tended perennials pulled up to make room for plastic playground equipment that looked out of place against the home's natural landscaping. When I tried to address some of these changes, Brianna would remind me that families living together needed to make compromises, that I should be happy to have company instead of complaining about minor adjustments to accommodate everyone's needs. But these weren't minor adjustments. They were systematic erasures of the life Margaret and I had built together, replacements of our choices with theirs, transformations of my home into their preferred living situation. The most frustrating part was how reasonable they made it all sound, how they framed every change as a practical necessity rather than a personal preference. Derek would explain the logic behind each modification with the confidence of someone who believed his knowledge of modern living was superior to my decades of experience creating functional, beautiful spaces. Brianna would support him with reminders about how much money I was saving by not having to maintain such a large house alone, as if my ability to care for my own property was something they were helping me avoid rather than something they were taking away from me. By the end of their first year in my house, I felt like a guest in my own home, asking permission to use spaces I'd built with my own hands, adjusting my routines to accommodate their preferences, and watching the physical manifestations of my life with Margaret disappear one improvement at a time. But I told myself this was temporary, that things would return to normal when they moved out, that the sacrifice of my comfort was worth helping my family get back on their feet. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning when I went down to my workshop to finish a jewelry box I'd been making for Emma's upcoming 9th birthday. It was going to be a surprise. Hand-dovetailed joints, a secret compartment, and her initials carved into the lid with the same care I'd put into every piece of furniture in our house. But when I reached for the workshop door, I found it locked, with a note from Derek explaining that they'd reorganized the basement for safety reasons and that I needed to check with him before accessing my own workspace. I stood there in my basement hallway, holding the key to my own workshop in my hand, staring at a lock that someone else had installed on the door to the space where I'd spent thousands of hours creating the beautiful things that filled our home. The lock wasn't just a piece of hardware. It was a symbol of how completely my own family had taken control of the house I'd built for them, how thoroughly they'd forgotten that this was my home and I was their host, not their tenant. When I confronted Derek about the lock, he launched into an explanation about liability concerns and insurance requirements, speaking to me like I was a confused old man who didn't understand the complexities of modern home ownership. "Larry," he said, using the condescending tone he'd perfected over the past year, "there are power tools down there, and the kids could get hurt. We're just being responsible parents and protecting everyone in the household." But this wasn't about child safety. This was about control. Derek had been systematically taking over every aspect of my house, and now he'd locked me out of the one space that remained entirely mine. The workshop wasn't just where I kept my tools. It was where I went to think, to create, to remember Margaret and the dreams we'd built together. It was the heart of who I was as a craftsman and as a man, and now I needed permission from my daughter's husband to access it. The final explosion came when Brianna found me trying to pick the lock on my own workshop door. Instead of being embarrassed that her husband had locked her father out of his own space, she was angry that I was making a scene and acting irrationally about what she called reasonable household rules. That's when she delivered the words that changed everything between us forever. "Dad, you need to understand something," she said, standing at the top of the basement stairs like a landlord addressing a difficult tenant. "You should be grateful we even let you live here. This house is too big for you to manage alone, and frankly, you're becoming a burden. We're doing you a favor by staying and helping you maintain this place, but if you can't follow simple rules about safety and shared spaces, maybe we need to reconsider this arrangement." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of my lungs and leaving me speechless in the hallway of the house I'd built board by board, nail by nail, dream by dream. My own daughter was telling me that I should be grateful to live in my own home, that my presence was a burden they were graciously tolerating, that the house I'd created with my own hands was somehow theirs to manage and mine to be grateful for. I stood there in my basement, looking at the woman I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, realizing that she'd learned to see me as an obligation rather than her father, my house as her inheritance rather than my home, and my kindness as weakness rather than love. In that moment, I understood that the family I'd welcomed into my home had decided they didn't need my permission to stay, and they certainly didn't need to show me respect or gratitude for the roof I was providing over their heads. That night, I sat in my bedroom, the one room that still felt like mine, and made a decision that would teach my family exactly how much they should be grateful for. If Brianna thought she was doing me a favor by living in my house, I was about to show her what it would feel like when that favor was no longer available. The next morning, I called my old friend Rosa Martinez, who'd been selling real estate in our town for 25 years and had helped Margaret and me buy the vacant lot where we'd built our dream home back in 1978. "Rosa," I said when she answered her phone, with the warmth that had made her successful in a business built on trust, "I need to ask you something confidential. If I wanted to sell my house quickly and quietly, how would we go about doing that?" Rosa listened without judgment as I explained the situation. How my temporary house guests had become permanent residents who treated me like an unwelcome tenant. How my own daughter had told me I should be grateful to live in my own home. How I'd been locked out of the workshop where I'd spent 45 years creating beautiful things. "Larry," she said when I finished, her voice full of understanding, "you don't have to explain yourself to me. It's your house, and you have every right to decide who lives in it." We spent an hour going over the logistics of what Rosa called a discreet sale. How we could show the house while Brianna and Derek were at work, how we could handle inspections during school hours when the kids were away, how we could time everything to coincide with the vacation they'd been planning for months. "The market is strong right now," Rosa explained, "and a house like yours, with all the custom craftsmanship and the mature landscaping, should sell quickly to the right buyer. The hardest part was preparing the house for sale while living with people who had no idea their world was about to change completely. I had to clear out personal items without being obvious about it, had to make small repairs, and touch-up work seemed like routine maintenance rather than preparation for showing the property. Every day, I felt like I was living a double life, playing the role of grateful houseguest during family dinners while secretly planning their eviction. Rosa found the perfect buyer within a week, a young couple named James and Sofia Rodriguez, both teachers who appreciated craftsmanship and understood the value of a home that had been built with love rather than just assembled from standard components. They walked through my house with the kind of reverence that Derek had never shown, running their hands along the custom banisters and asking detailed questions about the joinery techniques I'd used in the kitchen cabinets. "Mr. Blackstone," Sophia said as we stood in my workshop, her eyes bright with appreciation for the tools and workspace that Derek had locked away from me. "This house is incredible. You can feel the love and skill that went into every detail. We promised to take care of it the way it deserves to be taken care of." That's when I knew I'd found the right people. Folks who understood that houses like mine weren't just real estate investments, but homes that deserved to be cherished. The timing worked out perfectly with the vacation Brianna and Derek had been planning for months. A week in Cancun that Derek had booked using his tax refund. The same tax refund that he'd claimed was too small to help with moving expenses for finding their own place. They'd be gone for 7 days, giving Rosa and me plenty of time to complete the sale, arrange for the closing, and prepare for their return to a very different situation than the one they'd left behind. 2 days before they left for Cancun, I signed the final papers in Rosa's office, officially selling the house that had been my life's work to people who would appreciate and protect it. As I handed over the keys to my workshop, my heart felt lighter than it had in 3 years. I was finally taking back control of my life, finally teaching my family that gratitude isn't something you demand, it's something you earn through respect and appreciation. And sometimes the best way to teach people about gratitude is to show them what they'll lose when they take your kindness for granted. While Brianna and Derek were posting photos of their luxury resort breakfast on social media, I was moving my personal belongings into the cozy cottage I'd purchased on the other side of town. A smaller place that was perfect for a man my age, with a detached workshop that had better lighting than my old basement space, and no locks that required anyone else's permission. Rosa had helped me find it through her network of contacts, and James and Sofia Rodriguez had been understanding about letting me take the few pieces of furniture that held special memories of Margaret. The cottage was everything my old house had been before it became their house, quiet, peaceful, and entirely mine to use however I wanted, whenever I wanted. The kitchen was small but efficient, perfect for cooking simple meals without having to coordinate with anyone else's schedule or dietary restrictions. The living room was just the right size for my reading chair and the lamp Margaret had given me for our 20th anniversary, creating a space where I could relax without feeling like I was intruding on someone else's family time. But the real joy was the workshop. Bright, organized and equipped with electrical outlets positioned exactly where I needed them, it was a craftsman's dream come true. I spent my first day in the new house arranging my tools and setting up workbenches, feeling like I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been locked away for 3 years. The relief of having a space that was completely mine, where I could create without asking permission or worrying about disturbing anyone, was almost overwhelming. I finished Emma's jewelry box in my new workshop, completing the project I'd started in the locked basement of my old house. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was able to create a birthday gift for my granddaughter more easily after selling the house than I'd been able to while living in it with her family. The box turned out beautifully, with dovetail joints that fit perfectly and a secret compartment that would delight a 9-year-old's imagination. Rosa called me on Wednesday to confirm that everything had gone smoothly with the closing and that James and Sophia were thrilled with their new home. They're already talking about the garden they want to plant and asking for your contact information in case they have questions about any of the custom work, she told me. You sold that house to people who will love it the way you did, Larry. You should feel good about that. I did feel good, better than I'd felt in 3 years. For the first time since Margaret died, I was living entirely on my own terms, making decisions based on what I wanted rather than what other people expected or demanded. I was cooking the foods I enjoyed, watching the television shows I preferred, and using my time exactly how I chose to use it. The silence in my cottage wasn't lonely, like the silence in my big house had been after Margaret passed. It was peaceful, restorative, mine. The letter I wrote to Brianna and Derek was simple and straightforward, explaining that I'd sold the house to a family who would appreciate its craftsmanship and that they had 30 days to find new living arrangements. I didn't apologize for my decision, didn't offer to help them with their transition, and didn't pretend that what I'd done was anything other than a direct response to being told I should be grateful to live in my own home. Dear Brianna and Derek, I wrote, I hope you enjoyed your vacation in Cancun. I've enjoyed my week of peace and quiet as well. By now, you've probably discovered that I sold the house while you were away. The new owners, James and Sofia Rodriguez, are lovely people who understand the value of craftsmanship and will take excellent care of the home I built. You have 30 days to find new accommodations. I've learned that gratitude works both ways, and since you felt I should be grateful to live in my own house, I thought you should have the opportunity to be grateful for the 3 years of free housing I provided. You're welcome. Love, Dad. The phone started ringing at 6:47 a.m. when they returned from Cancun, but I let it go to voicemail while I drank coffee in my peaceful cottage kitchen. 17 missed calls from Brianna, 12 from Derek, with messages progressing from confused to desperate as they realized what happened during their tropical vacation. Brianna's first message: Dad, strangers are in the house saying they live here now. This has to be a mistake. And by her fifth message, reality had hit. How could you do this to us? We have children. You can't just sell a house with people living in it. Derek's messages threatened legal action, forgetting they were house guests, not tenants with signed leases. Tuesday evening, Brianna showed up with Emma and Ryan, looking exhausted. The kids ran to hug me, but Brianna's face mixed fury with desperation. We need to fix this mistake, she said, trying to stay calm for the children. I made hot chocolate while she sat at my small table, unable to understand how I preferred this simple space. This isn't a mistake, sweetheart, I said gently. This is a consequence. When you told me I should be grateful to live in my own house, you made it clear you saw me as a burden rather than your father. She tried explaining she was stressed, didn't mean it, but I hadn't destroyed our family. I'd stopped letting them destroy me. Emma asked, Grandpa, are you coming back to live with us? Her innocence broke my heart, but reminded me why I'd made this decision. No, sweetheart, I said, showing her the jewelry box I'd finished in my new workshop. Grandpa has his own house now, and you'll find your own house too, but you can visit any time. 6 months later, I'm living my best life in my cottage, teaching woodworking at the community center. Brianna and Derek found an apartment. Derek landed a steady contract, paying their own rent like adults. The kids visit weekends, learning skills their parents never mastered, measuring twice, cutting once, respecting tools and materials, appreciating craftsmanship over convenience. I'm no longer anyone's burden or charity case. I'm a man who built a beautiful house, sold it to deserving people, and created exactly the life I wanted. Brianna calls, occasionally needing repairs or advice, but our relationship is different now, more respectful, honest about boundaries between helping and enabling. Sometimes the most loving thing for ungrateful people is stopping their enabling and letting them learn appreciation through loss. Respect isn't demanded. It's earned by showing respect to others. Gratitude shouldn't be requested when sharing your home and heart with loved ones. Tell me about teaching someone the difference between helping and being taken advantage of. Subscribe to Grandpa's Diaries for stories about standing up for yourself, setting family boundaries, and living life on your own terms. Remember, relationship foundations require mutual respect. People who tell you to be grateful for your own generosity need lessons in actual gratitude.